talking to a friend the other day, and he said to me, "Are you guys trying to change the world or something?" You know, and the truth is, yeah, we are. But it takes a dedicated team. I mean, it's late, you're out there working. I mean, we do this because we believe in what we do.
Pete started Give More Ministries 3 years ago, and we are all so honored to be a part of something so great.
So most people come in around 8:30 in the morning, and they go home around 8 at night. And
try 10.
yeah, thanks, Kate. Look, 8, 10, whatever. Look, we're working long hours, I get that. But what we're doing here is changing the world.
Give More Ministries is doing amazing work around the world. We help those who can't help themselves. We equip, we teach, we provide for those in need. I feel that God is calling me to put every ounce of my energy into this ministry. So that's what I do. If I leave this office completely exhausted, I know it's been a good day. You guys have done a tremendous job. I can't thank you enough. By the way, we're probably gonna get a phone call tonight. It's gonna most likely result in the largest donation to date. I know. Keep working hard, and remember why we do what we do. At some point, we'll get out of here.
Right. Apparently, we have some guy who's willing to give us $3 million. And he's supposed to call tonight, but it's 10 p.m.
The only downside to our ministry is that when I get to see my kids, it's usually when the lights are out and they're asleep. You know, I said to my wife several times, we need to take a vacation. And I've been saying that for over a year. Well, in fact, I've been saying that since we launched. I said that over 3 years ago.
Is that the donor? The donor.
This is Pete. Hey. How are you? No, you don't have to do that. Don't do that. Can we talk? Like, I'm coming home. What's going on? I mean it. She's done. She's leaving. Man, I'm sorry.
Good morning, everyone. This is the last part of the series on Focus on the Family. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And my whole reason for having this three-part on the Focus on the Family is because if I had the opportunity to go back and start my family of origin again, I would do differently. The first part of our series in the sermon that I talked about is that there is a gap between what God expected of us as a family and what our real situation is, and that there's a tension between. And then oftentimes, as I mentioned the last 2 weeks ago, that the key is to how do you manage the tension so that you can feel comfortable. A lot of times we take the matter into our own hands. When God said, husbands, love your wives, wives, submit to your husbands, fathers, do not exasperate your children, children, to honor your parents. That's God's expectation for the family. But how do we do that? Oftentimes I wonder that there's a gap because I often wonder, God, you don't even understand my situation that I'm going through right now. I don't even like my father. I don't even see myself in a way where my relationship with my wife is going that well. In fact, it was going south. I can't see myself seeing my kids who are so rebellious and then going against it. And all of these things becomes a place where you create the gap between you and what God expects of you to do. And so my point, the first part, is that God is comfortable with that tension that you are going through, because that is why Jesus Christ came to die, so that you can have Christ in your life to undertake those tensions, that you can have him be part. And then last week, we not only talk about making sure that you're comfortable with that gap, with the tension between what you are experiencing and what God's expectation of that is. That's why you need to go to God and allow the Lord to take over. And last week, we talked about the fact that one of the reasons that there is this gap and there's the way that we experience our family going south is because we do not want to give in to the next person. And Christ said, you submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So that there is this principle of mutual submission, which basically begs you and I to ask the question in terms of mutual submission. It's a very simple but practical question. What can I do to help you, Dad? What can I do to help you, son? What can I do to help you? You know, the wife or whoever it is. That's it will be a life-changing process if you begin to do it. Because what you're doing is when you mutually submit to one another, you're taking all what you have, or you're taking who you are, and you're leveraging them down. Because that's what submission is, to put yourself under. That you're coming under and looking up, and he said, what can I do to help? It will be revolutionary. It will change the dynamics of your family. And we're going to close off today. And this is not going to even be, I wish it was, but one of the things that in my family that I can remember back is that there was a time that I really hated my father. And because of that I felt when I was growing up with my siblings, I'm the oldest boy, not the oldest child, but the oldest boy. Grew up in a family of 12 kids. And there was one problem in the home, that Dad could not control his alcohol consumption. And oftentimes he become very expressive, if you know what I mean, when he's under the influence of alcohol. And many of the time when he is drinking that I come home, when he comes home, I know, oh, there's going to be war. And the next thing I heard my mom crying. So we grow up in that era. And begin to really come to the place where I really did not want to be a part of my father's life. I hated him. I took that hatred with me. I took that inside of me, and I said to myself, whenever the time that I am going to get married and start my own family, I will never be like my father. Then I came to Bible school. I had an old brother in the Lord who is a student of the Word. I never forget this. And if you are in the position like I am, and you have not even forgiven, or you have not let go of that hatred of your parents or whoever it is, or maybe your brother, your older brother, or maybe your older sister, or whatever that may be, I've never forgot what he said to me. Mr. Roy Pulliam said this to me. You can stop. Because I went to talk to him, because I struggle with that. And I said, I have this thing inside of me that I do not like. This hatred that I have of my father. I want to love him, but I don't know how. Do you know what he said? You can take this to heart. This is what he said to me. Todd, you can stop loving your dad when God stopped loving him. And that became such a breakthrough in my own life. I have memorized verses that God demonstrated his love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I've memorized all of these verses, but for the very first time, I begin to see the breakthrough. You can stop loving him, but from now on, you will continue to love him. But stop loving him when you know that God has stopped loving your father. And I did not know how to respond. And as you realize that it is the topic of today as we close off this series. And many of you would identify with me. Some of you come from a home where you probably are still taking and bearing the burden and the suffering and the pain and the loneliness of what you have experienced. So what I have hoped is for this focus in the family, that you can start from today. In fact, even you are the hope of the future generations. You are the hope. Yes, Christ is, but you are from now on, that you can imprint upon your kids. You know, I hear about the uprising, the youth, to make sure that you teach this to the kids as they go on, that they live out an experience that you may have never did experience when you were growing up in your family origin, in terms of the fact that teach them how to submit to one another. And here this morning, I want to talk about the family conflict. I began to look into the scriptures to give me some pretty good, position to stand on in terms of this. But when you look at the scriptures, here's the thing that I came with, that there is one thing probably that is so common to all of us. It doesn't matter whether you come from the Philippines, from the islands, or from Canada, that there is one thing that is all common to us as a family, and it is this word, conflict. The word conflict. At the same time, it's varied from different culture, from different people to the different families. And I looked at the scripture. Did you notice the family conflict in the scripture? Let me just pick up the book of Genesis, right at the beginning of time. Did you realize that jealousy in the family caused Cain to kill his brother? Drunkenness caused Noah to curse his grandson. Favoritism caused Abraham to play favorites in the boys being estranged from one another. The same thing happened to Isaac, who played favorites between his sons Jacob and Esau. And you know what? And they became bitter enemies for 20 years. The same thing happened to Jacob, who played favoritism between Joseph and his 11 brothers, resulting in them wanting to kill their little brother Joseph, but then end up selling him to slavery. Favoritism, the same thing happened to Isaac and Rebekah, fighting over which of their boys were going to get the blessings. So everywhere you turn, that there's conflict. And you begin to see that in the scriptures. But let me bring it to our time. You saw the video. A lot of time conflict in the home can result from a workaholic husband, as you see on this video, whose wife feels lonely and resentful towards him, and even towards his job. Children can also be a source of continual family conflict and aggravation due to the parents' lack of consistent parenting skills. Or maybe you come from a blended family in which an unaccepted step-parent or interfering in-laws are the source of family conflict. I know what I'm talking about. I've seen this in people, talking to people in ministry. It could also be families who are torn apart by verbal, emotional, or physical abuse. So conflict happens. And the thing about the conflict is, conflict in the family is like conflict nowhere else. So complicated. In fact, it's so emotional, it just seems that it will go on and it will go on and on. And part of what makes it complicated is we don't even process conflict the same way as individuals, and certainly not the same way as each member of the family. We process them differently. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned in the first part, is we come from a varied experiences in our families. Some of us grew up in families that are a bunch of screamers. And that is how we solve conflict. You know, everybody throw things around and they just yell. And the problem then arises when you, as a screamer, begin to marry somebody who is a non-screamer. Because yelling is so strange to a non-screamer. And in fact, it's so hurtful when you yell to a non-screamer, your words felt like it's 1,000 pounds heavy. And you don't even know that you're crushing her spirit because she wouldn't argue back. She will try to stop you from yelling, and they think that there is something wrong with you. Some of you come from a place where you are a peacemaker. You just don't argue. You just regress back. You just say, okay, whatever. And if you are fine, I'm fine. You're okay, I'm okay. When you know that is not true. Some of you love to argue. And you come from home like that, you don't see yourself in the wrong because you can't argue your way out. And the members of your family don't even want to argue with you because they think that you always win. Let me tell you something. It's okay if you win argument at work. It's okay if you win argument in sports. I know I've argued my way in sports. No, that ball was on the line. No, it was on the line. And you can win those arguments. But you win the argument in the home, in the bedroom, there is no winner. There is no winner. And when we begin to see all of this that's happening, and as he argues his way in, and some of you, in fact, some of you come from a home, you just avoid the problem. You just avoid conflict. You don't know how to handle conflict, and then so you just back off and you just avoid it. But here's the thing. Remember, when you win the argument in your home, you haven't really won the game. You got two people who are hurting. And that's a practical part of it. You may be right. You may be okay, say, man, I argue my way through that one. But when it's all said and done, it still is not over. It still is not over because that is family. And as long as there is family, folks, there is conflict. As long as, but here's what I want you to know. Like the principle that I have talked to you about before, in terms of the family and the ideal that God has set for us. When you practice mutual submission, very practical, leveraging what you have and who you are for the sake of other people. And this is also very practical. We may have different styles of conflict resolution. What we need to know is really there is only one source of conflict in the family. And if you begin to own that one thing, the emotional stress will begin to decrease. The tension and the tone will begin to decrease. And for that, I ask you to turn to James chapter 4. Because really there's one common source of conflict in the family. And we're going to look at James chapter 4, and I'm just look at that. First of all, look at the source of conflict in the home. And you often wonder, why do we, let's just stop fighting. Because there is no winner when we fight in the home. It's a couple of people who are hurting. James came right off in chapter 4, verse 1. Let me just read it to you. he began to ask the question, number one, folks, what causes fights and quarrels among you? That's a relevant question, don't you think? What is it that caused the fight? It seems like James is asking, okay, this is a general question. He's looking for many answers, but that is not what James is asking. This is not a general question. He's pointing out the fact that the reason they can't even solve their conflict is because they don't understand the source of the conflict. So he asked the question, what causes the fight and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desire that battle within you? Where is the source of the conflict comes from? It's from your desire that battles within you. And the source of the quarrels in my family is because there is something inside of me. Understand that. It's not something that is inside of you. It's something that is inside of me. At face value, I would have said, no, James, you don't understand. The quarrels and fight in my family is because of what is inside of them. Did you realize what they have done to me? You know what my dad did to me? I felt like I've been deprived of my growing up years because of fear and all of this unsettling emotional struggle inside of my life. Because if I think that I'm going to be the man of my house someday, I'm not going to be known as a wife beater. So I struggled. The quarrels and fight in my family is because of what is inside of them in my life. James is saying, it's what I have done. There is an inside of me that desire that is creating this conflict. And you'll begin to see what James is leading out to. But the commonality of conflict happens because there is something inside of me. If we stop there and really have the courage to own this very simple truth, that the source of all quarrels and fighting in your family stems from what is inside of you. Because I begin to blame my own life because of what my dad never did realize, that I come to the point of saying, I own all of that issue. I own that problem. Then all the emotions will begin to come down. If dad would have stopped and stand in front of my family and said, I owned it. And this is what James is trying to teach us, that there is something, folks, that is inside of you that is causing the quarrels and the fighting. Then he went on to explain, what is it that is inside of you? Look at the second verse, the second point. You want something. You want something. You desire something. But you don't get it. You don't have it. And what do? You kill. And of course, they're using figuratively. And every time you have conflict with any member in your family, James is saying, even if it is something that comes up over and over and over again, there is something that you want. Not just that, you want something that you deserve. Do you remember the promise that you gave me? Do you remember when we went down the aisle and then we exchanged our vows, we promised? You know, you promised me, you promised this to me. That kind of an argument. You know, you go on, this, you know, blah, blah, blah. We go on that all kind of thing. But every time, folks, you have conflict with someone in your family, the issue is that there's something that is inside of me, a desire that I am trying to squeeze out of you that you don't have it to give me. It is so relevant because here's what happened. Sometimes there's some things that you want so badly, whether it is from your wife, whether it's from your husband, whether it's from your coworker, whether it's from your brother, whether it's from your sister. You try to squeeze it out of them because it will make you feel better. Actually, it will make you even prouder. Because you want something bad enough, even to the point that you're willing to hurt or destroy the people you care about the most in order to get what you want. I have seen it many times. And maybe some of you are in that process right now of doing that very thing. Yeah, you come to church, it looks good on the outside. Everything is hunky-dory. But James said, you want something and you're not getting it. And you know what we do sometimes? We find it that we try to justify our action and we try to defend it by just saying, well, yeah, but you know what, Pastor, I just want the best for her. Don't give me that rubbish. I just want the best for him. I just want the best for her. You're lying. You know, you talk about lying. You're not. I just want her to reach her full potential. When deep inside you know it's all about you. And you're not going to get it one way or the other, whether that is by using your words or your actions. Whether you try to squeeze it out. Because how would you do that? Why would you keep hurting me, expecting me to give you something that I don't have it? And you hurt others more. But imagine, ladies and gentlemen, what would happen in your home if you just stand up and own this one idea. I will own my part. You know, learning from marital counseling and family counseling, one of the difficult part of ministry, actually. Do you know, you talk to the police people, they can go and arrest somebody anywhere, but when you talk about domestic issues, they'd rather not be part of that. I mean, they have to do it because it's their job, but I've talked to a couple of the police people. Give me any other thing. But domestic issues? But I begin to realize, even in my own life as a pastor for these years, that when some families, especially in the church, when there is issues and conflict in the family, I have realized, you know, many of them, in the churches that I've pastored, many of them will phone the pastor first rather than phone the police. And if we have the time, I can share with you experiences in some way. Sometimes I fear for my life. And going into some of these domestic issues. But imagine if you could own this issue. But we won't do it. Do you know, in family counseling time, when a couple comes in, oftentimes I learned this from other conferences that I've gone to. You can do all of it, and they're trying to blame each other. It's what she said, he said, oh, he said, and all of this. I say, okay, stop. You just give them a blank page. And you draw a circle. And you say to him, okay, take that circle like a pie. Carve out a piece that you think is the problem that you have created. The same thing with her. Do you know, every time that I apply that from people, I have never had a couple who would do that. I've never had a guy who said, okay, here's the piece of the pie that I own. I've never had it from a wife and said, this is the piece of the pie I own. And you know why that is? Because if you begin to slice out the pie that you own, and you're going to have to be responsible for it. And you're going to have to change your attitude towards that. And you're not quite sure whether you're ready to do it. And that's why James said, if you can own this one idea, but no. You want it, but you didn't get it. And so you kill. Wow. What if conflict began before it even began? Or maybe you're in the middle of the conflict. You just pause. Take a deep breath. Before you storm down that bedroom, if you walk down that hallway, before you even got this thing, I'm so mad right now, I'm going to give it to you. Before you even do that, why don't you stop? Why don't you stop? Take a deep breath. You'll be amazed to see how the perspective begins to change. But you begin to take, once you take the ownership, that, ladies and gentlemen, when you stand out and say, I own this, that's a game changer. The moment you own part of the problem, the temperature level goes down. You may lose the argument, but let's face it, you're not going to win the game anyways. This is family we're talking about. There is no win. It's okay at work, but not at home. The reason we struggle with this is because we don't realize and accept the fact that I own this part of the conflict. That is why you have a hard time stopping in the middle of the argument. That is why you have a hard time writing that letter, because you don't take ownership of the conflict. And because you lose some leverage. And it's all about you. James said if everybody in the family will own their part, everybody will lose a little leverage. Yes, I understand. But guess what he said? You will not fight and quarrel as much. Because part of why you get so angry is you did not get what you want from others. Very powerful principle. And then lastly, the solution of the conflict in the home. We look at the source. We look at the basis. And now look at the solution of the conflict. James said in chapter 4, you do not have because you do not ask God. What is the solution? James said that the reason you don't have it is because you don't ask God. Before you storm in that bedroom and you begin the argument, before you get in a rage, why don't you get on your knees and pour your heart out to God? Now, I'm talking to you Christians because James is writing to church people. James is not writing to some institution where they're prisoners. He's writing to the church people. Get on your knees and pour your heart out to God. Well, God, you don't know. I'm so mad right now. If I am going to pray, I'm going to pray at them. Change him. Change her. Get her to do what I think that she should do. Change him. Change my wife. And I'm not going to pray for them. I'm going to pray at them. Again, that's all about you. And James is addressing that the problem is what you want, you're not getting because you're trying to squeeze it out of someone who doesn't have it in them to give you, my brother. Why don't you ask God? Why don't you stop before you storm out in your boy's room and give it to him? Why don't you stop? If I were to start over again, because I raised 3 boys, and I often, in time that they've done things that I want to make sure that they know who is boss around that house. And there's been some time that I look back if somebody have talked to me about this topic, that I have the opportunity to stop, take a deep breath, get on your knees, or saturate yourself with the Word of God. Because if you don't, you're going to do it in your own way anyways. You're going to take it in your own strength. This is so powerful. And I just want to, as we come to the conclusion, before you start any argument, ladies and gentlemen, ask God. And you'll be amazed to see what that will bring. Suddenly your focus is not on her, on him. Your focus is on something else. And you will begin to see the change in the conversation. And you can see it for the better. Because if you realize and acknowledge the part of the problem before you even begin it, you own it. You're saying, yes, I'm not getting what I want, but I'm beginning to understand that part of what I want, that I know you cannot give it to me. Because this is really your issue. Because this is so much about you. And James said, did it occur to you? You have not because you have not asked God? Then why are you spending the time hurting that other person that you're squeezing out of them that you cannot get it from them? You have not because you have not asked God. Then James goes on to say, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with what? With wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, if you would allow God to really engage with your life, to engage with you at the level, what is it that you really want from me, God? And once you engage with God on this level, you will realize that it is not about getting what you want from others that they will not be able to give you. But realizing that you will take some ownership. I am going to take some, starting today, I'm going to take some ownership in the conflict that is happening in my home. Then you go to God first in prayer. Because that's the solution for the conflict that happened. Go to God in prayer. And I'm not saying papas, dads, you go. I'm talking about teenagers, sons and daughters and wives. I'm talking about go to your knees first. Lord, I am so mad right now. Would you engage with me? Would you give me the wisdom? Would you give me the words? Would you guide and stop my lips from saying something that hurts? And I want to conclude with a couple of questions, hopefully that we will grow together. Here's the first question. Is there someone in your family that is suffering because you are not getting your way? Is there somebody in your home that is suffering because you are not getting your way? Is there anyone in your family that is feeling the pressure to perform or to give you what you want when they don't have it? In fact, there's some of you, maybe your sons or your daughters are moved out of the house and they are still working to fulfill the expectation that you have placed upon their lives. And so they live with guilt. I cannot even come and please him or please her because I cannot meet up with the expectation that it may be time for you to phone and write that letter to that son or to that daughter. Because they should be living in guilt, trying to please you. But they suffer. So is there someone in your family that is suffering because you did not have your way? Here's the second question, and I close. Is there someone in your family that is suffering because you refuse to own the fact that this has more to do with you than it does with them? Do you know why you quarrel and fight in your family? Because there's something you want that you're not getting it. There is something you want. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, seek to know God, folks, and follow him. And you will understand that before even the storm begins, pause. Before the conversation even, get on your knees and ask God, Father, before I confront her, Father, before I face my son, let's face it, that there are things that need to be confronted, correct? There's something that needs to be confronted. Before I, God, address this issue, again, there are issues that needs to be addressed. Before I do that, Lord, I just want to recognize what is my part, Lord. And I want to deal with my own part of what I want before I go and address it to my son, before I address it to my wife or to my daughter. Do in me, God. Do in me what you need to do in my life before I squeeze it out of the people that I love so much. Something that only you can give me to begin with. And you will begin to see the family dynamics will change. And may the Lord take your family and begin to look at the future family. Here in Mosaic, here in your own family, your daughters, teach the people, the family in your home. Because I believe that as strong as the family is, it would reflect on the strength of this congregation. As strength of the family is, because your family represents a building block of a healthy nation, if that family is healthy. And may the Lord bless you. Let me pray. Father, thank you for the teaching that James has allowed us to explore and to see. I pray for each of the family, oh Father. I pray for your mercy to come upon each one of them. Take away anything, oh Lord, inside of us that will become obstacles for us of not seeing the principle that James is trying to teach us today. I pray in our conflict resolution that we will take the humility that only the Spirit of God can give us to accept and realize that we do have to own the problem, the part of the problem. Humble us to the place of knowing that and change us, Lord, the way you want to see change happening in our lives. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I have told lies, and I'm pretty sure you too have told lies more than once in your life. Would you let a lie dictate the way you live? Of course not. You wouldn't. Unfortunately, there have been lies that we've been told that sounds very convincing, but they're outright lies. For example,
Yum. Sorry, that was always been my struggle.
now that's a lie. There are other examples, other lies that somehow many of us still see as truth. In this series, we will learn how to counter the lies that we've been told, how to overcome the struggles that were founded upon the lies of the enemy.